Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Aria and today I want to show you how I did the animation and simulations for this animation that I'm working on as part of a larger project. And then next week I'll do a part 2 on how I created the look and the camera work as well as where I get some of my sound effects. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is get some kind of base mesh. So if you've been following my channel, this will probably be pretty straightforward. But if this is your first time here, download the Make Human app from the link in the description and install it. And then once you open it up, you'll see this default setup here. And then what you need to do is go to the modeling tab. And then underneath of that, there's all these different settings here. And there's also subcategories on this side here. So just use these sliders to get the look that you want. And then once you're happy with your mesh, you can go over to the Pose and Animate tab here and make sure you're on Skeleton and make sure that none is selected. If you're not using Mixamo, you can add a rig for Blender, but for our purposes today, we want to have none selected. And then we're going to go to Pose here and we want to change from none to T-Pose. Okay, so now that we've got that, we need to export our mesh. So let's go back to Files here and just make sure you click these little dots here under the Save tab to save your project file, just so you can come back to it if you need. And then once you're done that, click Export here. Let's change to Filmbox. And we're going to click these little dots here and then find somewhere on your computer to save this. Click Save. And then the final thing you want to do is just click this Export button right here. And it should take a few seconds and we can move on to the next step. Alright, so the next step is to add some animation to our characters. So go to mixamo.com and you can create a free account if you don't already have one. And then what you want to do is click this upload button here. And then you want to find where you've exported your file from Make Human and click open. Then this should just take about 30 seconds or so. And as long as everything uploaded correctly, you should see this here. So we can click next. And then we want to place these in position here. So chin, let's go right here. And then we'll grab the left wrist here and drag it across. The left elbow here. The left knee. And then we can place the groin somewhere in this area here. Alright, so once that's done, you can leave everything else like it is and click next. Alright, and then we just need to wait about 30 seconds to a minute for this to upload. Okay, so if everything worked correctly, you should have this here, just an example of your character, so we can click next, and next again. Alright, so now that we've got our character here, what we want to do is create two different animations. So let's click here and type in run, and this is the one that I used here. Alright, and then if we go over here, we want to click in place so that our character runs in one spot. And the reason we do that is just so we can connect our two animations together better, and then we'll just use something else to control the forward motion. Alright, so click download. Make sure this is set again to FBX, and we'll change this to 24. Leave everything else the same and hit download. Okay, so now that we've got that, we want to add one more animation. So let's go here and type in jump. And then we just want to scroll down a little bit here, and this is the one I used. The reason that I use this one because it's kind of like a running jump, so it works good with the other animation. You do want to pick something that will work well together. Leave everything else the same and hit download. Alright, so now that we've got our animations, we can finally move into Blender. Alright, so open up a new scene in Blender and just delete everything that you see there. And by the way, if you don't want to do that every time, you can go to defaults here and save your startup file. But I like to leave mine just so we're all starting from the same spot. Alright, so now we can bring in our first animation. So let's go to File, Import, and we'll go to FBX. And then just find on your computer where you exported your Mixamo animation. We'll start with the running one here, so click Import. Now if we zoom in here and go back to frame 1 and hit play, you'll see that we've got a short little animation. So what we can do is extend this here. So hit A to select everything here while hovering over this window here, and then we can hold Control and hit C to copy. And then we're going to go to frame 32, hold Control and hit V, go to frame 63 and do the same thing, and then we'll do it one more time. And so now we can click over here to deselect everything, and then we're going to click and drag and delete these frames here, which will leave us with 99 frames. So hit delete and delete keyframes. Alright, so now we want to bring our second animation in, but what we can do first is we're just going to rename this collection here to character 1. Open these toggles here, turn on the viewport and the render view here, and then we can just click and drag across to hide those. We can click here to add one more collection and click and drag so it's in the scene collection here by itself. Click this to make it visible, and then we can just name this to character 2. Okay, so make sure you've got this second collection selected. We can go to File, Import, FBX, and we're going to bring in our second animation, which is Jump, and we can hit Import. And for the animation that I did, I only used the first 13 frames. So if you click here at 13 and then just kind of scroll with your mouse wheel and zoom in here, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Alright, so we can select, click over here to deselect, and then click and drag all of these frames after 13, hit delete, and delete keyframes. And now we can hit A while hovering over this window to select everything else, Control C to copy. Then we can hide this group here and unhide our original group. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is just click on this armature here, and we'll just go over to the end of this animation, which was at 99. Go to the next frame, which is 100, and we can hover over this window and Control V. Let's set our timeline to 120 frames. And now if we go back to frame 1 and hit play, you'll see that we've got our animation. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is move our character forward on the y-axis here. So the way we'll do that is connect everything here to an empty and animate that. So Shift A, let's go down to empty, and we can just use a plain axis. And then we'll hit G to move it, Z to lock it to that axis, and we'll just drag our mouse up till it's just above our character, and then G to move it again, Y to lock it to the y-axis, and just bring it over till it's just in front of our character here. Okay, now we can right select our first collection here and go to select objects to select everything inside of there, and then hold shift and we're going to click this empty right here. This should be yellow and everything else should be orange, and then we'll hold control, hit P, and we're going to set parent to object and keep the transform. Alright, so now we can click out here to deselect everything, click our empty, and we want to animate our empty, so let's hit I to add a location keyframe. And then we'll go to frame 100 on our timeline, and we can hit G to move, Y to lock to that axis, and then we're going to type in -20 and hit enter. We can just zoom out a bit just to see. And then the last thing we need to do is set the keyframe, so I, and we'll set another location keyframe. Alright, so now we can go back to frame 1 and hit the spacebar to play, and you can see that it is sort of working, but it's speeding up and slowing down at the end. Alright, so let's just go up here until you see this little plus sign at the top here, and then we're just going to click and drag to create a new window. Click this little menu here, and we're going to go to the graph editor, and then scroll down on your middle mouse key just to zoom out a bit, and you can hit normalize just so everything is contained in one little area. And everything should be selected, but if it's not, you can just hit A to select everything, and you can see that we've got currently Bezier curves, and we want to change those to linear, so you can right click anywhere, go to interpolation mode, and we'll click these to linear. Okay, now just hover your mouse over the center here until you get the double arrow, right click, join areas, and then we're going to click over here to close that window. Okay, so now if we hit play, you'll see that our animation is working like it should. And by the way, if you're having trouble centering yourself, you can just click any object and hit the decimal key on your numpad to orbit around that specific object. Okay, so let's add a ground plane. Hit Shift A and we'll go up to Mesh here and add a plane. And then we're going to hit S to scale it and hit 5. Let's zoom out a bit, and then one more time we're going to hit S, and then we're going to hit Y to lock to the Y-axis. And then we're going to type 4.18. I know that's a bit specific, but that should be about right for our character jumping off the edge. So let's just hit play to see. And that's looking pretty good. Alright, so we can go back to frame 1 here and just hold shift and click and drag just to move back here. And then come back to the center here. We're going to hit Shift A, we'll go to mesh again and click cube. Then we can hit G to move, Y to lock to that axis, and hit -5. Next, let's scale it, so hit S, 0.05, and then you can hit Y to scale just on the Y-axis, and then we can click or hit enter, and then hit the decimal key to center it, and then we can scale it on the Z-axis, so S, Z, and 1.6, then G, Z, 1.6 to bring it up on the Z-axis as well. Alright, and then we just want to scale it a little bit wider, so we're going to hit SX and type in 1.5. And then hit enter. Alright, and now we're ready to create our fractures. So let's make sure our wall is selected. Alright, so let's hit tab and we're going to right click and we're just going to subdivide this and type in 25. And we don't actually have to do this for our animation because we're going to use a different method to break up the wall. But this is a good idea to do if you're using any other method. So I'm just going to do that. And it won't really matter for our animation, but it is there in case we need it. Alright, so now we can hit tab to go back into object mode here. And we're going to hit the 1 key to go into front orthographic view. Then if you want to move around, you just want to make sure that you're holding shift and using the middle mouse key. If you just use the middle mouse key, it'll jump out of orthographic. So we'll just hit 1 again, and again just make sure you're using shift while you move around if you need to. Alright, and we're going to use the cell fracture method to break up our wall here. So to use that, you just need to go to edit here. We'll go to preferences, add-ons, and just type in cell. And make sure this is selected on. This add-on comes already installed in Blender, so you should have no problem with that. And now we could go into Object and Quick Effects and set that up right away using the vertices from our subdivision as a guide, but there is a different way. So if you click the Annotate tool, which is also known as the grease pencil in older versions, and then click here and change from 3D cursor to surface, what we can do is we can actually draw sort of a map of the fractures that we want to have. So I'm just going to double check here just to make sure about the height that we want to do it at is about right here. Alright, so I'm just going to hit one more time to go into orthographic. And now what you can do is basically just draw, start drawing some cracks here. So I'm just going to do a spiral like this. I'm using a mouse, so mine's going to look, whatever. And then I'm just going to add some lines in here just to break it up even further. And again, this is just an example, so I'm not going to go crazy with this, but feel free to do whatever you want here. And then once you're happy with that, we can move on. So don't even worry about stuff like this. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to really affect what we're doing. All right, so click here. And now we can just middle mouse click to come out of orthographic view, and you can see that our annotations are now stuck to the surface of this cube. And then the last thing I want to do before we add our cell fracture here is I just want to put our cube in its own collection. So let's just hit plus here, and then we can click and drag the cube into this collection here. And then that way when we create our pieces, they'll just kind of go all into this collection instead of into our main scene collection. And that will give us more control over the visibility. Alright, click the cube one more time here, and now we can click object and we can go down to quick effects and cell fracture. And now you can see under point source that we've got a few different options here. We are using the annotation pencil, which means that the subdivisions really are kind of pointless. But if you did want to skip using the annotation pencil, you could just click own verts and it would use the subdivisions that we created to create the fracture for you. Okay, so click here, and then we just want to change our source limit here to 500. And this doesn't mean that you'll get 500 pieces, but it'll just limit the pieces to 500, so it won't go over that amount, but the amount will be based on the markings that we've made on our cube. Let's set the noise to 1, which will just give us a bit more randomness with our pieces here, and then we can set the recursion to 1 as well, which will just go through and refracture some of the pieces. And because we have it selected to small, it's just going to focus on the smaller pieces to do the refracturing. If you changed it to random, it would go through all of them, but we'll just leave it to small for what we're doing here. By the way, there's lots of great tutorials on using the cell fracture add-on, so if there's a little bit more that you're wondering about, you can go to YouTube and search that, and you'll find a lot of great tutorials showing you how to do that. And then the final thing that we want to do is make sure we add it to our collection, so just type in collection 3 or whatever you've named your collection here, and then that way all the pieces will go into one collection, which will give us a lot more control over the visibility settings. Alright, so once you've got your settings good to go, you can click OK, and this should take about 30 seconds to break everything up. Alright, and now you can see that all of our pieces are inside this collection here, so we can hide it if we need to because there's quite a few. And it can be really annoying to scroll up and down between these if you need to. Okay, so let's just click and drag to hide the original cube here, and we can just hit N on the keyboard, go to View here, and we can go down to Annotations and turn this off. Or you can click this minus button to delete it. Alright, so let's hit N to close that menu, and you can see now that if we hit play, absolutely nothing happens because we haven't added any dynamics. So let's click any piece, it doesn't matter which one, just pick one. And just make sure you're in the physics settings here, and we can click rigid body. Leave most of this the same here, but we do want to open up the dynamics here and the deactivation and turn both of those on. And this will just work a little bit like a glue to hold things together until a different object interacts with it. Okay, so now we want to add dynamics to all the other pieces, but obviously it's very time consuming. We don't want to do each piece. So what we can do is right click on collection 3 and click select objects, and you'll see that it'll select everything and it'll still leave this original one highlighted. And now we can click object here, go to rigid body and copy from active, and then just give that a few seconds and it should load up. Go to object here, rigid body, and we can go to calculate mass, and you can see there's a bunch of different presets here. In our case, concrete will work, so let's click that. And now you can see that if we click all these, they all have a different mass based on their size. Alright, so if we hit play, you'll see that still nothing is happening, and the reason is because these are all deactivated. So what we need to do is add a rigid body to our character. So let's click on our mesh here, and we can go to rigid body. And then if we hit play, you'll see that obviously things are not working like we wanted. So we just want to make sure that we've got animated selected, and that way the rigid body will stick with the animation that we have. So then if we hit play, you can see that things are starting to work. But of course we want to add a rigid body to our ground. So let's select our ground, go to rigid body, and then we can change this to passive here. And if we hit play now, you'll see that things are starting to work, but a lot of the pieces are falling through the bottom, which is not what we want. So what we can do is change the collision shape. You'll see that if we change this to box, it still kind of does the same thing. So the best one that I've found is if you change it to mesh. This is the slowest calculation, but it will give you the most accurate results. And you can see now that there's only a couple pieces falling through. But if you don't have a very powerful computer, you might want to change this to something like box or convex hull, which will give you pretty good results as well. Okay, so go back to frame 1, and we don't want everything falling all at once. It kind of looks funny. So what I did for that is if you just select one of these here near the top, you can just uncheck dynamic and then hit the C key and scroll down on your mouse pad to bring our selection size up, and then we can just click and drag to get some of these pieces here and maybe some of these ones down here. And then let's hit escape to exit that selection mode, and then we can go to object here, and one more time rigid body, copy from active, and then every time you do something like that, you're just going to want to recalculate the mass. So let's do it one more time, recalculate the mass, and select concrete. Okay, so if we play our animation now, you can see that only certain pieces are falling, and feel free to tweak that as much as you want to get a more natural look. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this part of the tutorial. The last thing we can do for this tutorial is just add a window for our character to jump out of. So hit Shift A and we'll go to cube, and then we'll hit G to move and Y to lock to that axis, and then we'll just drag it over till the center point is right at the edge here, and then just click. Then hit the decimal key to focus in on the cube, and we can just scale this. So hit S, Y, and then we're going to type in 0.05, and then we can hit S to scale, but we don't want it to scale out on the Y axis, so we'll hit Shift Y, and now you can see that we've got our scaling locked to the Z and the X axis. Okay, so then let's hit play so we know about where our character is jumping through. Alright, so now we can go into edit mode by hitting tab, or you can go up to here and select edit mode, and then we're going to hold control, hit R, and then just move your mouse to one of the edges until you see the guide here, and then we can just click and drag, control R again, click and drag, and then we're going to go to this side here, control R, and then we can bring this up, control R one more time, and we can just bring this just underneath here. And click. Alright, so now let's hit 3 on our keyboard to go into face select mode, or by selecting here, then we're going to click, hit delete and faces, and then we'll click the one behind it, delete and faces again. Alright, so let's just zoom in a bit here. Hit 2 on your keyboard to go into edge select mode, or click here. Hold Alt and click this edge here to select everything. Shift and Alt and we'll click this edge here. And now we can hit right click and go to bridge edge loops. which will fill in all of the spaces. Alright, so now we can hit tab to go back into object mode and watch our animation. Alright, so you can just come back here and just make sure that nothing is clipping. And it looks like it is a bit, so what we can do is just hit GY and just bring this out just a bit more. Click on our ground plane here, SY to scale it, and then we'll just drag our mouse until this is connected, and then we should be good to go. Alright, that's looking awesome. Oh, and the last thing I want to show you is how I did the slow motion kind of fall at the end. So just when we're at this point, you can just click the armature here and then just use your middle mouse button to scroll in. And if you want to extend this animation a bit, what you can do is just click and drag these keyframes out like this. Pretty much just spacing out the last few keyframes. And now if we hit play, you'll see that we've got a slow motion jump at the end. Awesome. Alright, so let's just zoom out and we can watch this one final time. Awesome, that's looking great. Alright, so that's everything for this week's tutorial. Next week we're going to go through how I created the other walls and just some tricks I used for making sure that they interacted properly with each other. Sometimes these can come out and activate the other walls a little bit early, so we'll go through that. And then I just want to show you some quick and easy ways that I finished my scene, did the lighting, and added an HDRI, as well as a quick and easy way to create the camera movement. Alright, so if you enjoy what I'm doing, please like and subscribe to my channel, which will help me bring a lot more of these animations and tutorials your way. Alright, see you soon. Bye!